today, which will deal with money. And here I will introduce our speakers and tell you at the beginning that unfortunately Ines Marinkovic, who is announced as well as our keynote speaker, arrived to Rijeka safely, but had certain health issues, so she will not be able to be with us here. As I said, what are we going to talk about now? Well, it's financing and funds issues. I'm pretty much of an intruder here among specialists and experts. As a philosopher, I'm not very good with money, but I will do my best to moderate the talks of our speakers and actually try to provoke you to react and to give your impact on what we are dealing here with. So here, Boško Nektarjević is our first speaker, and maybe I can introduce each speaker before he starts his presentation. Boško Nektarjević is Executive Manager of the Balkan Security Network. As an alumnus of the MBA Solvay Business School, Université Libre de Bruxelles, he has an extensive experience in the area of assistance for organizations in applications to EU or other international funds and support programs, but also providing technical assistance to the European Commission. Mr. Nektarjević is also responsible for development of regional network with the aim to contribute to successful implementation of EU policies for justice, freedom, security and defense, and to assure effective coordination between regional, national and European level. The floor is yours. I don't know, as you have the presentation, yes, I will thank you.
First of all, I would like to thank you and other respected hosts for organizing this splendid event, as well as previous panelists and speakers for stimulating debates, and especially to you for finding the energy and interest to stay here for this panel after this delicious lunch. Due to the time constraints, I will not propose a opening workshop for 15 minutes of a power nap for a relaxation of first 15 minutes. Anyway, as a brief introduction, as our moderator had announced, behind me there's more than 10 years of experience in proposal writing for EU-funded projects, proposal development and implementation as well, but on the other side, hands-on coaching and training of project leaders to advance the quality of their results, the impact and sustainability of their projects. Those of you who have tried to write personally some project proposal for some of the, or any of the most competitive EU funding schemes will already guess that this path had required some continuous advancement and in knowledge and skills, and sometimes painful learnings, and persistence or stubbornness, depending on how your culture will perceive this at your preference. And out of curiosity in order to find out how to tailor the remaining part of the presentation, may I ask you please if you could just let me know by raising your hands who had been trying to write project proposals for EU funds and who had been successful. Oh, this is excellent. So that means that the event will provide us an excellent opportunity to develop partnerships, I presume. Have some matchmaking for opening upcoming calls. Right. Anyway, I had a very strong motivation to take part in this specific panel because I've contributed to create several prestigious and accredited BBA and MBA and PhD programs in Croatia and in Serbia that swiftly had became regional leaders in their respective fields. However, since 2003, I've been looking for an attractive and adequate PhD studies that would be complementary to my daily work, and which I had started and then stopped due to obligations in 2003. And as well, since 2006, I have been actively working to create the first certificate master's or PhD program for project management and leadership for SCE, Southeast European region, or as our colleagues had indicated, the Balkans, or I will recall and define the region, with a very limited progress. So this is one of the proposals that I would like to present that might be discussed later on as some sort of an addition to the presented curriculum for the interdisciplinary studies. Now, on the other hand, I had the opportunity to explore from the side of a possible student, prospective student, from the side of an organizer, a new entrant in the market, sort of an entrepreneurial role, and from the side of an advisor and consultant for established institutions in the region, or on how to create new certificate or masters or PhD programs. And those are the key questions that have emerged in the recent several years. So, the quality of education in the region, how do we measure quality, and who gets to assess cost-quality ratio based on what criteria? That was the first question that was open, looking at the flourishing and booming accredited institutions offering questionable quality in the region, quality of education. Now, then, availability and accessibility. In my preparation for this panel, I've also examined all the info sources available to see what an average student searching for a master's in this area will find. So, I've discovered that we have very high entry barriers. If you take a look at the screenshot of the first Google search results page, you'll find what our wise dean and host had mentioned earlier. You'll find as the first European Interdisciplinary Studies program, the program offered by the College of Europe. However, the tuition fees and the enrollment procedures are quite demanding and challenging for most of the students from the Balkans and from the ECU region. Now, to my joy and pleasant surprise, there was Southeast European Studies program funded through a Tempus funding scheme, which is now included into and adjusted into Erasmus+. And then that led me to explore how many of interdisciplinary programs we have funded already through Tempus, and I have found 6 or 7 in the previous 2 years. There certainly should be more of them in the recent past and before, but 7 or 6 were funded in the last 2 years. Then as well, that leads me to the essence of this presentation, which are the possible funding sources and how many of available sources of, incredible sources of information we have today to gain an orientation in terms of how to choose a program, how to rank them, and especially this will not be tackled and explained elaborated throughout the presentation for the new entrants in the market, because we have well-established reputable institutions that are now launching this new program. But there are very high entry barriers. So, funding procedures, if we would try to summarize them, would fit in a very simple triangle. And I don't know how many of you had the opportunity to see this triangle before. Is this picture familiar to some of you? Well, I see a lot of kind of gestures that would indicate that it is not. Well, everything within EU funding arena, as we would call it in daily consulting language, is basically happening between the politicians within the EU who are facing obviously some demanding challenges. On a global level, like climate changes and energy challenges. On the EU level, as we have heard in the first 2 panels as well, and national levels, struggling with increased unemployment and so on. But throughout complex process of negotiations, they come to new treaties and new policies. And simplifying the process, I know that there are among you many professors and many experts who are much better acquainted with the process than I am. I have spent only 8 months going step by step throughout the process to identify each one of the opportunities to influence it. Now, why am I mentioning EU policies? Because if I would continue this simplified explanation, the European Commission, as the executive body, then has the objective to create instruments how to implement successfully the policies that the politicians have adopted. Looking from the perspective of beneficiaries, from our perspective, we ought to design project proposals in such a way so they will contribute to achieve successfully EU policy objectives. And initially, when someone would approach us, how would we measure the quality of the project idea itself at the very beginning is if we would see this as the starting point, then we would measure how much the situation would change after the project had been implemented. So we would measure the impact that the project would achieve in order to successfully implement the policy objectives. And that would be the starting point in trying to identify the most adequate funding source for any project idea. What you will often find and discover is that your project idea is not covered only by one EU policy. It is much more common case that it will be covered by several. This is why I'll make a brief presentation of all the available funding options that we have, covering a very wide range of issues and areas. We have since 2014, since the beginning of the new funding cycle that will last until 2020, we have basically 4 groups of programs with different operational structures. programs for smart and inclusive growth, and they would include Horizon 2020, the most relevant funding program instrument for research and innovation. And I think I could confidently say, please, if this is an erroneous statement, please do correct me, that this is the largest grant scheme available in the world at the moment, with some 79 billion of euros. And then there's COSME, the targeting enterprise industry, stimulating entrepreneurship, and there's Erasmus Plus, that will be pretty much in the focus of this presentation, targeting education, youth, since this year sport as well, and so on and so on. I believe that one of the colleagues will cover in one of the following presentations structural funds, so I will not waste time on explaining structural funds. Then we have a group for sustainable growth, group of programs for agriculture, rural development, maritime and fisheries, life, environment and climate action, globalization, and emergency aid reserve, which we unfortunately had to use in the last 2 years quite extensively. Third group, covering the aspects of security and citizenship, such as asylum, migration, justice, rights and citizenship, Europe for citizens, like an attractive funding scheme, as we mentioned before as well. Then Creative Europe, that had sort of brought under one umbrella all the previous programs covering culture, media, and so on. And the fourth group of instruments for global positioning of and strategic positioning and implementation of EU interests throughout the world, for like instruments of pre-accession, targeting candidate countries, and then partnership in neighborhood instrument, and so on and so on. Coming back to the very beginning of our search for the most adequate funding source among all of these, if you look at the programs that we've just seen on the table, and if you look at the sub-programs, you could count more than 300 funding sources with specific procedures and specific deadlines and different expectations of the operating structures. So, where do we start? Usually, we would start from the Europe.eu, which is the central website of European Union, and searching by topic, you will find this section, EU by topic, was called EU by policy until some 2 or 3 months ago, but due to adjustments to make it more user-friendly, it has been changed. So if you look at the education, training and youth, you'll find in the very introduction that it's a flagship program in this area. Erasmus Plus seeks mainly to tackle youth unemployment and boost skills and employability, which leads us to explore a little bit more what's offered within this instrument. Then we have EU Youth Strategy, Erasmus Plus, and so on and so on. If you take a closer look at the program description, you'll find that it says investment in education and training is crucial for boosting young people's personal development and job prospects. So obviously this is one of the central issues and central objectives. The youth unemployment is about 20% in the EU. The percentage of young people who are not reaching the minimum level of skill in reading math is similar, and some member states have 50% rate of unemployed young people. And on the other side, the research has demonstrated that 1 in 3 employers have difficulty finding people with appropriate skills. especially in the most innovative sectors of the economy. And I believe that throughout the discussion we have a little bit, but only to some extent, tackled this issue about the employability after European Interdisciplinary Studies. Now, the key question that was raised at the introduction of, basically through the summary of this webpage was, to what extent you can decide when, where, and what to learn. And I have found that for the students in the region, it is a very limited extent. Now, EU flagship program in this area, Erasmus seeks mainly to tackle youth unemployment. Why? The second one that's also mentioned on the front page, where the summary of the policy is presented, is Maris Sklodowska-Curie scheme, which is under a different umbrella. It's not under the Erasmus Plus umbrella, it's under Horizon 2020 umbrella. And that leads me to explain a bit more what can we find on Erasmus Plus. This is a screenshot from the Erasmus Plus webpage. It says new Erasmus Plus calls and program guide have been published. The cover in the next period 3 key actions: learning mobility, support for study, work and teaching training, or developing professional skills and competences abroad. Key action 2, cooperation and partnership, opportunities for collaborative partnerships between education, training and youth institution, as well as between the worlds of education and work, and the policy reform. Supports the process of reflection, dialogue, and evidence-based building needed to deliver reform in education, and so on. Now, I had to open, I was very much curious to see what kind of opportunities are ahead of us in the very next period when new calls are open and so on. So I have to explore the deeper the guide, the new guide. And to my pleasant surprise, it had only 300 and something pages. Usually when we would start the project design, for example, under the Age 2020 umbrella, it would require at least 600 to 800 pages of introductory readings. And there was a program, I don't know, for all 3 schemes. Actually, the 4th one was added in as 4th, on only 300 pages. So it indicated that this might be a bit less competitive scheme than Age 2020 is, and that we might have a better chance than success ratio on average. And indeed, through a keyword search, what you will swiftly identify is that Erasmus Plus offers master's students worldwide a chance of a scholarship to follow joint high-level international study programs run by university partnerships. So, there is an opportunity to Erasmus Plus to fund joint master's degrees programs, or as we had seen under Temple's double degree programs, I noticed as well. And then knowledge alliances offer cooperation between higher education institutions and enterprises. So funds knowledge alliances between higher education institutions and enterprises, bridging the gap between the academia and the industry. Knowledge alliances may support activities addressed at, and I won't cover all of them, but just those which would be most interesting for interdisciplinary studies, developing and implementing new learning and teaching methods like new multidisciplinary curriculum. And this is the way, a possible way, that we can try to attract and mobilize more funds for this. And learner-centered and real problem-based teaching and learning. Because of the available time, I cannot explain in depth all the funding schemes. However, it says capacity building in higher education scheme, and it says projects include joint projects developing new curricula and degrees. So there's another option. In the very introduction. What you'll find as well offered is how Erasmus had sort of joined under the same umbrella of the previous programs and adjusted them a little bit. And you'll find under Erasmus itself program that it is targeting the higher education, and you'll find that within the Erasmus Mundus you'll find the joint master degree program, which will provide you further guidance and instructions on how to tailor-make projects and project initiatives to respond to requirements. So I have listened carefully to some of the previous speakers, and I've noticed that you had experience with joint master's degree. The specific benefits lies in the higher integration, jointness, and the excellent academic content and methodology they offer. So there is no limit in terms of discipline. For more precise, now I thought, by reading this, I thought that I discovered a solution. This is how we can fund interdisciplinary studies. Now, with a little bit less experience in EU funding arena, I would be feeling quite enthusiastic about it. However, the first next link would lead us to more documents, right? And it had led me to explore the operational structure in charge for this program, which is Executive Agency, Education, Audiovisual and Culture. And there you can find, first, the more detailed explanation of the objectives for the upcoming and open calls. And you can find as well, which I had found in the previous project, design and consulting assignments, very useful. You can find a catalog of those projects that have been already implemented and funded. Now, either you can work in partnerships with them or you can compete with them. I don't think that you will find a third solution because if the Commission has identified them as examples of good practices, they would like to see something similar replicated. And if the Commission had identified them as bad practices, then they would like to see you demonstrate on how you will address the issues where they have failed and why your methodology or the work plan or the partnership will be better. Especially, I would like to focus your attention, if you will find time and interest, to take a closer look at the award criteria. Because this is the essence of the evaluation-oriented project proposal development. And as well the reason identified within ESRs, which would be evaluation summary reports. So the reports provided from the evaluators to the beneficiaries of why the projects from the region have been rejected. There will be no time for me to explain in more detail, but you can find basic orientation for partnerships in the field of education, training and youth. So what are the aims and priorities of strategic partnerships? You will find more information about Knowledge Alliance and especially about the aims of Jean Monnet, where you can find just a simple word phrase search. You can find that it supports and funds EU interdisciplinary studies. That's another important point. For open calls and upcoming calls, usually when the European Commission establishes an instrument, it is established through decision, and then you'll find work programs, annual and multi-annual work programs. They are offered on the website of the DG for Education and Culture, and this is how the screenshots look like. And as well, here you can find deadlines for open calls. For most of them, those of you who are interested in create an application, to create a project proposal, it's still not too late to start. If you're at an early stage of drafting your project idea, then the best strategy would be ideally to find a partner and a consortium to join. Otherwise, if you're in a more advanced stage, this is a great opportunity for you to network and strengthen your consortium. I will very, very briefly point out that there are two other schemes under the Horizon 2020 funding scheme. One, Marie Skłodowska key reactions, previously known as people schemes. The structure had changed a bit from FP7 now into 4 key actions, which would support innovative networks, supporting early stage training, including industrial doctorates and joint doctorates, individual fellowships supporting experienced researchers undertaking mobility, international and inter-sector cooperation to research, innovation, staff exchange, and co-funding of regional, national, and international programs, funding doctoral, and so on. And the European Research Council, if we exclude ERA chair projects that have, in a way now, became the only assessor of RECPOC schemes, which were highly interesting for the region. You'll find this scheme interesting because it's basically bottom-up, it's excellence-driven, and I do believe that here we have potential for to be successful in this kind of scheme, although we had a very low success rate in the previous period. The very next step for those interested to take a deeper look at the open funding schemes in terms of Horizon 2020 would be to identify funding opportunities, searching through keywords, and then making initial analysis of the call text and creating initial word graph packages to identify what expertise we will need and what kind of partners we need. And also, one of the essential advices in terms of how to be successful and how to get to the level of excellence in project proposal writing is to use evaluation criteria as the central questions within your customized application form. So, not to waste time on describing what you would want to achieve, but if you plan to devote time and effort to design a project proposal, doing this extra step, additional step to answer the questions that evaluators need to answer, to do their work, will prove to be highly beneficial. As well, for H2020, you have expected impact that is provided. So the good practice is to copy expected impact in the application form. So you work backwards to check within the project design whether you have covered each one of the words and phrases that are expected by the Commission. I'll skip common mistakes in project development. Most of you are familiar, I guess, with common mistakes. I'll conclude this presentation with this slide, providing some advices on how to continue in very practical terms. So, the first one would be to educate evaluators using simple and easy to understand language and using references from the background document in order to bridge the gap, the language gap, using the terminology that the assessors, evaluators, or however they are called, must understand. Then make sure to understand assessment criteria before you start writing by placing them as the central questions within your application form. as well provide just enough detailed analysis which will include for each one of the statements. It's a kind of a mental habit while we write in project proposals to first start with needs analysis and activity description and then impact analysis for each one of the statements. Measurable evidence to support your claims from credible info sources. And as well, now it's 4:12, and this is the end of the presentation and last advice. Try to imagine what we usually do on trainings. Try to imagine if I would give you, we started early, very early today, and you've traveled a long way, well, some of you have. Try to imagine if I would give you, well, 80 pages of text in Brussels English. Most likely the evaluators will approach the assessments and your project proposal with the same curiosity, energy, enthusiasm, and so on, as you would now if I would give you 80 pages of someone's project proposals to read. So make their life easier. They will love it and they will appreciate it. If you use bold text and pictures and different ways of presenting information, not to lose their attention, not to overload them with information, make assessment easier. Now, I'd like to thank you for your attention. I will remain available.
Thank you. I will not take much of your time. Maybe besides these images and bolds and all sort of marketing packages, the essential thing is the content, but it's a philosopher who's speaking, so you can skip it. I will now present Mr. Matija Derk, who is an alumnus of the Universities of Zagreb and Dublin, and he's the Assistant Minister to the Ministry of Regional Development and the EU funds of the Republic of Croatia. He was Director of the Regional Development Agency, REDE, Ltd, and an expert associate to the Croatian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and European Integration. His areas of expertise are, besides international and European relations, the strategic planning, fundraising, and EU funding, likewise capacity building and economic development. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thanks to organizers for inviting me here today. I will try to give some interesting information, I hope, and also some insights that come from practically 3 years of very intensive work on programming. Just to mention, part of my portfolio in the ministry is programming. So it means 7, 13 financial perspective, 14, 20 financial perspective, all key documents, partnership agreement and operational programs. I'm also a national IPA coordinator, so entire IPA program is under my portfolio, and I, along with Herve, coordinate Croatian participation in European semester. I didn't prepare this in presentation, but I may touch upon it later on. What I will try to do is use the presentation, which is in Croatian, by the way, so I did it for myself. But I will try to basically give you some ideas that may trigger a discussion. It's much easier to answer questions than describe the entire process and all interlinks and linkages between different parts of the system, different documents, different issues and problems that simply come out of this very, very complicated job. Just for an introduction, partnership agreement is more or less ready for Croatia, which means that we expect its approval the latest next month, so November 2014. So we have no objections or any critical or blocking findings from Commission, which means that more or less the document is set. And simply to mention, operational programs and partnership agreement are very closely linked documents. So it's basically the same document with different level of details. Partnership agreement captures the entire strategic basically approach of the country and has to describe all funds, which means also agriculture, fisheries, Cohesion Social Fund and Regional Development Fund, while operational programs, they are separated, each the way the country opts to develop it. Just to mention briefly, we will have 4 operational programs: agriculture and rural development, marine fisheries, which will be managed by Ministry of Agriculture, and for competitiveness and cohesion there will be 1 operational program, it's called operational program competitiveness cohesion, and 1 is going to be for human resources. So here already you can see that there are huge interlinkages and potential synergies between different operational programs, because competitiveness is a very horizontal issue. It doesn't concern only economy, it concerns basically entire society. Such is also the issue of innovation, which is extremely important. Horizontal issues dominate, and this is where I just jumped in on a previous panel discussion about interdisciplinarity and or not. Well, basically both. You cannot do it any other way, but it has to be clear what you want to manage and how, from which place, in interdisciplinary level, to properly utilize sector-specific knowledge. Otherwise, it's not going to be good enough. But well, that's just my opinion. So, key goals that we outlined. Basically, we started this process early in 2012. And we had a bit of a problem. We still do. And this problem is basically lack of national strategic framework. We don't know how to develop strategies, how to combine them, what are correlations between them, what are... we don't have anything standardized, basically. So each ministry is for themselves. They do a strategy, and then we think, oh, we have a strategy, we're good. But what about content? How this content relates to other strategies? What are correlations, synergies between them, and how to identify them? This is the critical point. I will come back to this also through this whole presentation. So, well, for me the first shock was lack of national development framework. And I had to draft documents for 10.7 billion euros in 7-year perspective. 7 years is already double the time of the only, well, legally defined planning system in Croatia. This is budgetary planning for 3 years. And I have to plan for 7 years with this very fragmented and planning system with lots of holes. Many strategies not even developed. And guess what? This Croatian situation, which is basically governed by Murphy's Law, I would say. So everything that can go wrong will go wrong, including the financial perspective 1420, which is now extremely strategically oriented. So it's performance framework, it's ex-ante conditionalities, which means you have to have national strategic documents in place. So just as a bit background, so we needed to take things from very beginning, where we defined 3 main goals: employment, well, new jobs, building up a stronger economy, and building up or building more equal and inclusive society. So these are very general goals, but for that we have 10.7 billion euros, and that's what we have now in 1420 financial perspective. Now, maybe just one more thing about planning and how these documents that we are planning, like partnership agreement, operational programs, what is their role, what is their importance, apart from the money. So, the critical thing there is to understand that these documents are not development strategies per se. There are documents that are strategic, but this strategy speaks about how Croatia is going to use European money in the context of EU 2020. So it doesn't define our national priorities, but it basically says how we want to address our national priorities within the framework which is already predefined, EU 2020. So we need to have national priorities first to be able to link them with EU priority areas. So that's another thing to consider when looking into entire programming exercise. So since we defined these 3 major goals, we then went into defining the critical challenges. First of all, of course, is competitiveness of economy. Extremely big, important challenge, very horizontal, but and cannot be handled from one place. This is what I mentioned before, and we'll come back again. Environment and resource efficiency is, of course, one of very big problems, well, not just for us. Development of sustainable and modern traffic infrastructure, extremely important considering geopolitical positioning of Croatia within EU. Well, Rijeka may actually have quite interesting benefits out of simply position. Market, labor participation, and quality of education. It's, of course, a major challenge, and will take quite some time to actually get this one, all of them. Poverty, inequality, and discrimination, and efficiency of public administration. So, they're here, and whenever you look at one of these major challenges, you can see it actually relates to others as well. So again, horizontality and overlaps, which doesn't necessarily have to be bad. It can be a good thing if it's positively looked as a place where you can create synergies. But that will require something else, better communication between institutions to identify and then work together to create adequate policy mix to streamline money to get effect. So you can actually divide work, have less labor intensive position for each ministry if you focus them properly, but it has to be governed and managed from central place. This is where maybe interdisciplinarity comes in perfectly or naturally. But then you build on sectoral knowledge to get sectoral expertise and quality to overall policy. So just a reminder, thematic objectives, this is basically coming from EU 2020 strategy. There are grouped by colors for those who can read duration. So it's inclusive, sustainable and smart growth. These are 3 growth pillars and 11 thematic objectives predefined for EU 2020. So this is our framework within which we have to design our programs. But it's not the only thing. This is just the EU 2020 strategy. We also had to combine or build these documents also on findings of European Commission in the context of European semester. So there's a national reform plan and country-specific recommendations that are basically very important for Croatia as it is now, but in the future there will be new recommendations, and this is basically an ongoing exercise which will have to be supported somehow. This may be, and may come back to that again later, this may be also something to consider when we talk about defining or developing curriculum. This is a huge gap. There is no capacity. In every area, and I will speak today, there is huge gap in capacity. It's just a matter of approach and streamlining activities to get proper programs in combination probably with some practice, otherwise it's not going to work, to get things rolling. Kind of optimistical statement, but okay. So there are also government goals in terms of economic recovery and creating of necessary precondition for growth. Accession treaty, regulation directives, and of course, again, thematic concentration rules for planning European funding. So all these documents actually contributed to our current final draft of partnership agreement. As I mentioned before, you see that there is one key document missing, and it's called National Development Strategy, which will capture all of this under one bracket and simply give guidelines to all land ministries or sectors to align their sectorial policies to get better effect. So how things look? So numbers are much easier in Croatian. European Fund for Regional Development 4.3 billion, Cohesion Fund 2.5, Social Fund 1.5, Agriculture 2 billion, and Fisheries and Marine Fisheries 250 million. Altogether just below 10.7 billion. So, which are key priority areas in operational program competitiveness and cohesion, which is basically main investment operational program. So it's ESF is in OP for human resources, but this is where we build infrastructure. So grouping of ERDF and cohesion fund, First priority axis is 660 million. It will be managed by Ministry of Science and Ministry of Economy. These are, this is money for research infrastructure, for clusters, for bringing up economic, well, basically capacity of academia, but also private sector to do research. Some of it goes into research infrastructure, but there will be lots of grant schemes from mainstream programs that will further facilitate collaboration between economy and academia. This is critical part. So, basic research is very important. Let's not forget that. But I mean, what we have problem here is getting some value out of research, which means that we have to think about converting R&D into GDP, which means more applied research focus. This is what's missing. We have very low investment in R&D, 0.75% of GDP. Our target is 1.4 by 2020. Which means that we have to think about, well, not only in R&D area, but in all areas, we have to think well beyond structural investment funds. We will have to combine all sources of funding which we can find to basically promote agenda and get to end result. Information communication technology, it's mainly focused on broadband infrastructure, but it will also deal with the use of ICT and some preconditions to create better conditions for modern economy. Basically, it's more or less focused on the rural areas, which where you can find market failure in this respect, but it's extremely important, and what we want to do here as well is try to see this and design implementation mechanisms which will be based on financial engineering instruments, which could multiply overall investment potential. Business competitiveness, it's more it's thematic objective 3, which targets directly small and medium-sized enterprises. This is extremely important for us. Our capacity to do research basically is hampered not only by lack of understanding, but also lack of money to utilize our existing research capacity to bring academia or researchers on board to support development of products or services. What we want to do is basically invest on thematic objective 1, which targets research infrastructure. This is public or private research infrastructure, but then put a lot of money to SMEs to start using this research infrastructure. So we are basically creating a business model which is not funded on public spending to support basic costs of operations of research institutes. What we want to do is give money to economy so they can ask for services. If they ask for services, it's a commercial deal between SMEs and research institutes or academia. This is the point. So we need to change mentality. We don't change mentality by putting more money to those people, to those areas, or in the same way you did before, simply to fund research activities. So this is one important change of, I would say, mindset. One of, it's already defined, one of key investment priorities related to access to funding is also going to be done through financial engineering instruments. So our estimation now is about 220 million euro is missing in the market to well, start or improve economic activity. Energy efficiency and renewable sources, 530 million. I put it in here because it's directly related to competitiveness, not only through cost savings, savings through introduction of energy efficiency, but also can be very interesting in the context of research as well. So it's also a very interesting priority area. Priority axis 9. Actually, it's 9. No, it's 10. Sorry, it's my mistake. But it's 216 million euro. It's about education, lifelong learning, and skills. So allocation here is for infrastructure. So this is very limited, but there is also another part of allocation. Okay, I will just skip forward to which also which is funded from ESF, which is a core for investment in education, as a matter of fact. So this is here in yellow. We have 270 million euro from Regional Development Fund, but we have 450 million from ESF, Social Fund. And the difference is huge. Now, it's not just because it's almost half, more 50% bigger allocation or 100% bigger allocation from ESF in comparison to RDF, but it's a type of investment. ESF is soft. It's about education, exchanges. It's not infrastructure. It's just a small part can be infrastructure. So it's a huge. This is going to be even better problem, bigger problem to spend than infrastructure. So you can apply if you like. We'll see how things work. And one important priority area is improvement of quality of public administration. Now we have 191 million euro for that. It's also ESF, so it's also soft type of activities, and this can be very, very important also if seen through the lens of this initiative as well. Public sector in Croatia, I would say even in the region, has huge problems in competence. Competence is the biggest problem there is. Just to simply say, managing European projects is a technique. You learn it. Then you have some experience and you know it. But content in terms of, let's say, environment or energy, you have to go to university. You have to spend years and years to learn this. And this is what gives us context and content, sorry. And from that position only we can hope to have quality proposals. Otherwise we will have proposals that are drafted from, well, project preparation experts. It's vague, it's general, and it's not hitting target. And problems coming from there can be potential disasters. I may come back to that a bit later. I will just come back to our obligation and that comes from regulation is also to allocate 5% of ERDF allocation to urban development. We opted to use integrated territorial investment as a model or a concept to support urban areas, and we allocated more than it was necessary because we know and see that cities are major drivers of growth, and major cities in Croatia are also university centers. When you look in a bit in more detail what we will fund, you will see that it's basically targeting university areas but not actually going into R&D, because R&D is national priority. We have to define nationally what our targets are and then allow cities to comply, align themselves and create something else, not exclusively work locally on curriculum, for instance, but to create environments, physical environments, where students will communicate with business, with academia, with everybody. So it's basically more something like an open innovation platform that can create new ideas and new growth that can help us shift into self-employment based on initiatives of individuals, because individual qualities are neglected these days, and it's not really going to work like that, because a global environment changes things radically. It's already changed, and you can see that small projects from I don't know where can emerge globally and creates huge impacts and earn huge amounts of money. I mean, there are cases, I don't have to mention the most obvious ones like Microsoft or Google or Skype recently. Well, it's not even recent. But you see that there are so many small companies coming out from office or from nowhere, basically, having a huge impact on society. So what we would like to have from ITI is basically cities to focus on a topic or an area and develop it on an integrated manner. Because what it means is that you have to think about transport, you have to think about education, you have to think about culture, you have to think about business, you have to think about NGOs, you have to think about individuals, you have to think about a variety of things which together work in the same space. There are examples which I find very interesting because it's done in Copenhagen. Denmark is one of the most developed countries, basically built a business area and left it as a standalone business area with no integration of housing or cultural or any other content. So after 6 o'clock, there's nobody there. It's a dead city in the city center. This is not how things work. And what you can do is basically open up these university areas like we have here and bring other content in. And it can be supported through European funds. So maybe I'm spending too much money on ITIs, but the point is that we have 4 major centers, but we didn't want to make it easy for them. So we said, okay, we are not targeting only 4 major centers. We will have a competition from, let's say, 8 cities that have 50,000 plus citizens. Why? Well, it's easy. I mean, they have to work for it. If we predefine 4 of them, they will take it for granted. It's their money and they will take their time. We don't have time, so we need to put some competition on top of it. We'll see how it works. So our idea is to foster progressive cities, which will link to thematic objective 1, 3, and 10. So it's education, business, SMEs, and research. Clean cities, which will relate to thematic objective 4. That's CO2 emissions, thematic objective 6, environment, and thematic objective 7 as transport, and inclusive, which basically goes into employment and social inclusion. Thematic objectives 8 and 9. So, where are problems? And this is one idea that I've been also trying to communicate. It's about a need to create some national initiatives. National initiatives which will describe a problem, which will describe something we want to achieve, and then work around it and create policy mixes. Bring institutions, ministries around it to propose how they would like to address the joint problem, or have bigger projects, broader projects that will basically bring them together. So why? Where we have problems? Well, we have limited funds. So needs to invest is much broader than money we have available. As simple as that. Our national budget is contracting. The European money is there, but it's not enough to cover everything. So we need to prioritize. We need to figure out what will have best possible impact for us in a long to mid-term period. Our problem is also sectorial approach. Each ministry is for themselves. They define their sectoral ministry policy and they don't care what other ministries do. So we have overlaps, we have in funding, in jurisdiction, even we have sometimes gap in jurisdiction that nobody knows who is in charge for something. So weak coordination between sectors and the lack of focus on targets, on what we want to achieve. What are our main goals? Maybe to come back to project, on a project level, what usually happens, and this basically requires a change of mentality of all beneficiaries, is we have people that are focused on calls for proposals. So you launch a call for proposal and everybody says, oh, it's launched, let's prepare a project that will be applied to this call for proposal. But that means that you have to align your idea to what call says. This is wrong. I mean, you are applying because you have a need, you have a problem which you want to address. So if you don't care about broader context of what you want to achieve, then projects will probably end up partially addressing what you want, and the other part of the project will go all over the place and you will have no use for it whatsoever. If this happens, then you are basically spending your money and your time on activities that have no purpose. Don't do that. focus on what you need to do in a more strategic way, and then figure out what is it that you can write to feed your agenda, your broader strategy, and try to confine yourself. But that requires a bit different approach. And usually our approach is, let's get money. I would be perfectly honestly, I would be much happier if we have lower absorption rate than some countries, but better effects from what we invested in. That is the point. And how to get there requires lots of communication, lots of coordination, and understanding about what is policy, how it's defined, how to define targets, and how to integrate things. And I don't see anybody teaching that. So challenges, complementarity and synergies, buzzwords. But yes, they are extremely important, especially in conditions with limited funds available. It's very hard to make a broad public understand what you're trying to achieve if you focus on projects. Projects address something, but it's very, very small part of what you need in general. So you need to put things in context. If you're not capable of doing that, then projects may be successful, but they will not be perceived as such. And the initiatives will fade away. You will work hard, you will get result, and nobody will appreciate it. And of course, the stimulation of and creation of a stimulative environment is extremely important, especially in a new financial perspective. What it means basically is that there will not be no copy-paste projects. You can almost forget about it. So you need to be creative, and creativity requires some skills. And again, different approach and different way of thinking. Now that's going to probably be the biggest problem that we will have to face in the following period. However, it needs to be addressed. So, solution can be to predefine some sort of national initiatives where you can actually use integrated approach to preparation of planning documents or even projects or concepts, as a matter of fact, to clearly link it to broader, longer-term objectives. And of course, creation of communication platforms. And I don't mean communication to public, I mean communication between institutions that have to communicate about the topic to get things done. That also means not only institutions need to be involved. There are stakeholders in, well, economy, in civil society, that need to be brought on board to provide with their feedback or input. If this is not done, then again you have problem. Then you close yourself in institutions, even if you broaden it up, it's still institutional framework. You need to open up. Well, it's clear that technology and knowledge is moving in such great speed, it's going to be very difficult to follow. It's already impossible to follow. And our institutions need to catch up and be more proactive. If you don't have this opportunity to get feedback from everybody and capability to process this information and maintain these networks, you're done for. This is not for Croatia, this is for everybody. It's just too quick, and technology is eating us up as it is. So we have some already disintegrated initiatives, and I will try to use e-schools as some sort of example. Why integrate? Because there are different sources of funding that you need to utilize to get to e-schools concepts running properly. You need to build broad infrastructure to all schools, which means thematic objective 2. You need to design and develop proper curriculum, which means thematic objective 10. You need to create the content. It's online content for online learning. You need to develop this. Who's going to do it? Well, you can basically use economy to do that. You can use small and medium-sized enterprises to do that. If you design a proper framework and allow them, or maybe subsidize them a bit from thematic objective 3, to give them a boost to bring their competencies and equipment and, well, capabilities up, they can deliver. And it's a business line. It's all about facilitating and fostering business further. We also have some initiatives which are in the scope of thematic objective 6, which is more like environment related, but it will address cultural and natural heritage. This is also integrated. It also goes into rural development, into SMEs, into education, into everything. Then smart specialization strategies. These are very fertile. It's ex ante conditionality. We have to deliver. And these are very fertile grounds to create additional or more or new initiatives around it that can be actually central for universities. Should be, but it's about research capabilities that will have to go into more advanced education eventually. Okay, I mean it's very brief, probably, and taking too much time as it is already. So just to sum up, we have more than 2.7 billion euros divided into competitiveness-related priorities. More than 45% of overall allocation for Fund for Regional Development is targeting SMEs. And we, well, coming from our obligations from accession treaty and directives, we will have to spend 3.5 billion into environment and adjustment to climate change and network infrastructure, which basically means transport. Most of these areas are not really generating new added value, especially environment. It's a different value that is generated there, but it's not economic value. It's more like spending even more to maintain the system to keep our environment clean, but it's not really giving money to the budget. It's basically drawing more money out of the budget. So this is the big balance that has to be also taken into consideration. This is why competitiveness is extremely important. Competitiveness without innovation is not going to work, and universities and cities and urban environment that focus on people are central to actually get to more innovation, to be more competitive. So why multiplier effect is extremely important? Because it seems that we have lots of money, but 7-year allocation of 8.4 billion euro is a bit more than 50% of annual national budget. So 7-year funds is half of annual operation budget. If you divide it into annual allocations, it's about annually, it comes down to approximately 8% of annual allocation, a bit more. But it's extremely important money because it's investment money. This is the money that we don't have now. We are just servicing loans and salaries and social. So it's not a happy situation for us. So this money is extremely important, and it has to be clear as well. It's not a small amount of money for Croatia, and most investments, well, probably all investments will be done through this framework. We will have to also find our national co-funding, and this is basically what will lock our budget, and there will be just a few maybe investments outside of European funding, scope of European funding. So it's very important what we want to do with this money, and if we don't use it to make important or radical, I will even say a radical step toward the transformation of society and economy, we will probably not make it, because things will just move ahead and we will just lag behind. So, yeah, this is the end. All right, I will just take one of points down there and say European funding is not supposed to be seen as a major source of funding, despite what I said just before. It's just, what is European money? Well, money. The point is, what is necessary is to think what you want to spend money on. Where do you achieve impact? And then even getting a loan is not a problem, if you know that you will get return on it. But to be able to figure out how to get return on it, you have to have capacity and capability. And that brings us back to administration and managing all these processes and figuring out the proper way how to design mechanisms which will teach people, train them, and help us retain institutional capacity, institutional memory. What happens is that best people leave, and when they leave, there is a gap behind them. So some sort of fluctuation has to be ensured, which means that you have to bring new people into the system annually, because you know that a certain percentage will leave, and train them. But it's another matter for discussion. I could go on. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Well, thank you very much. Actually, what I have in mind is the incubator laboratory that we intend to make and that we think of as our European studies, where we are going to answer what, where, who, and how we are going to make standards, how we are going to articulate our strategies, and it will actually help us to continue on these matters with our next speaker. It's our friend from the Faculty of Economics here in Rijeka, at the University of Rijeka, Igor Cvejic. His area of research covers social convergences of the new members of the European Union and preconditions of their economic and social cohesion into Europe. How we are going to look for money if we still don't know whom to address, how to prepare our applications. Igor Cvejic teaches European macro and micro systems, economics and politics of international exchanges. He is the member of the Organizational Committee of the Summer School International Environment and the European Integration, organized by the Faculty of Economics and the Jean Monnet Chair for European Economics Integrations. And he actually participated actively and directly in its work from 2005. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. So yes, I'm from the local University of Rijeka, for Faculty of Economics. I've been working there since 2002, and right away I started to cooperate with Professor Vinko Kanđija, who is the chair leader of the Jean Monnet Chair, and within which we organized a lot of programs, summer schools, but also we have graduate study program which deals with the European Union economy. It is an economic study, but it's also connected to other disciplines. For example, I will mention that we had a good cooperation with Professor Godiloga. She was present earlier, and she was also Jean Monnet Chair. And inside, for example, this summer school, we had a lot of participants from different states, from the Western Balkan regions. There was a good interest, especially in the early years. And we had students from different study areas, not just economy, but also law, political sciences, but also other, even education sciences, teaching sciences, and so on. Inside this projects we were mostly addressed to Jean Monnet. Our colleague from Belgrade told us about the Jean Monnet possibility of funding. We managed to finance a few projects. We had quite a good results with these applications, but sometimes, of course, we failed, maybe because we didn't prepare enough good, let's say, goals and impact. So I'm speaking about this because during the first two presentations, I think this is one of the main issues, how to present the expected goals and the impacts of the projects. The other issue is how, well, we couldn't finance these programs also without the help of other sources, for example, the ministries, but as you know, especially in the last years, we had the crisis and limited funds to fund educational programs, which are relatively innovative. So as we are already a member of the EU now, we are not that innovative anymore. But a few years back we were more interesting. And of course the third area is the business area. So we had to make contacts with the Chamber of Commerce, for example, to also some tourist organization from the region. We tried to make the summer school as also let's say a possibility to present our local tourist areas, so they recognized us as such, so they helped us also in organizing some trips or maybe present their hotels and give some let's say refreshments or even dinners for students, and so it was really very difficult to attract companies to get involved in this funding process. So for me, I think it's one of the main issues is how to connect business and education, and how to present from the academician's point of view, how to present to the companies, the businesses, the ideas of such programs, especially interdisciplinary programs. I don't know, well, I'm very interested actually to know how this works in Western Europe, so perhaps from our colleagues who are present at this conference, maybe they can tell us something from this. Well, I think that's the main issue for one of the main issues which can be discussed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Igor. Now comes a presentation of someone who is extremely valuable for Center for Advanced Studies and for the University of Rijeka, because Nataša Jakominić-Marot is head of University of Rijeka Center for EU Projects with over 10 years of experience in the field of international projects, technology transfer and innovation. And she actually coordinated and actively participated in over 40 projects co-financed by the EU. In addition, her responsibilities include large infrastructural projects co-financed by the structural and investment funds. The first two with an approximate value of 24 billion euros, ongoing since early 2014. Since 2010, she has also been engaged as external expert for projects evaluation within several centralized and decentralized EU programs and IPA. Upon the invitation of the European Commission and European Parliament, she has been the last Croatian representative to participate in the European Union Visitor Program in 2012. She was awarded several fellowships and scholarships, including that of the Council of Europe for Young Leaders. As a total fan of lifelong learning, in 2013 she completed her MBA in Vienna and participated in the Harvard Kennedy School Executive Education Program. She has authored several publications and articles in the field, in her field of interest, and as I said, a very valuable person for us who need to teach and how to articulate those money surge. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I think Sana's introduction was longer than I will talk. I just have several points. Coming as one of the last speakers, I think it doesn't make a lot of sense to repeat what people already said before. But I would like to stress out something that was said by the previous speakers and is never enough stressing out. So I think one of the last points Mr. Dirk said was that European funds should not be the only source of funding. We all face the crisis, we all know that there is a lack of national funds and all other funds, but we have to seek other options, because European money is not intended to fund everything we need to do. I mean, as we have seen in the presentations, there are strategies, there are several thematic objectives, there are priorities, and this is what the money is there for. Everything else has to be funded from somewhere else. We need to find the money. Either it's, I mean, if we talk about this concrete thing we have been gathered here to discuss, and it is the European Studies program. So we have to find diversified sources of funding, whether it's students' fees, EU money from different programs, different instruments, whether it's different foundations, different national foundations, international ones, whether it's industry or companies, but you all have to, once that you have replied to who you are teaching and what you are teaching, whether it's interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, or to which degree, once you have answered these questions, you have to think about how to approach each specific set of problems in order to have a good EU studies and sustainable one, which is going to be very challenging, I think. What I think is very important is to understand who will employ the students that you teach. Whether you intend to have, I'm not sure because I was not here the whole day, but I'm not sure that you have replied to a question whether it will be a master level study or it will be modular for people in specific or with specific needs. I think it would be good to have both options or more than these also. Because for modular teaching, you can have people coming from different disciplines with different needs, and maybe they're already employed, they just need to learn something more, something they're missing. So when you reply to this question, I think it's very important for every one of us to take the responsibility for the changes around us. So we are all responsible and we can influence everything around us. We can influence our own institutions, we can influence the society. And Croatia has entered the European Union slightly more than a year ago. But still, people do not feel that they can influence whatever is going on in the European Union. Whereas even if we're a small country, we can still do something. We all have our own networks. And what you are doing in CAS is also a huge network, and it's very important. Somebody said before earlier today that it's important to give or offer our experiences to the people in the other countries which are prospective European Union countries. And I think this is an important focus of where CAS and European studies would come in for. I was thinking of Boško's earlier presentation. He mentioned several programs, and when I was preparing for the panel today, I just identified several options that may be more attractive or more realistic to go or to start from. So Jean Monnet was mentioned several times, but what you have to be aware is it has some 9 potential sources of funding or calls, where most of these are intended for already established institutions, higher education institutions, associations, which already do have expertise and knowledge in the sector, where I think we're only starting. Of course, we do have specific expertise, but I don't think we are recognized as an expert set of institutions, let's say, in that field. So maybe the Jean Monnet institutions would be a good start. It offers a lot of money, but it depends on who the staff will be in your program. Also, the Erasmus Plus is a good way to start, because there are several options. You could start with networking. I see you have a great network. I mean, the speakers that have been here today, I think it's an impressive set to start with. There's a lot of expertise obviously here, so we could start discussing on what the program could be to make the benefit not only for Eastern Europe or Central Europe or whatever we want to call it, but for let's say, Europe as a geographic area of whatever that means, to be beneficial for the Western Europe and for the Eastern Europe, for the member countries and those which are not. Because we all face the security issues, and if we have the environment around us, which is relatively safe, let's say, if people have jobs, then probably we are all better off. And this is what Western Europe could gain from giving the money, let's say, to those which still need to develop. So I think that's more or less what I needed to say, and I really want to conclude with saying that it's very important for everybody to understand that we all really do have a power. Even if you change only your own office or your own university, it means something. There's a lot of us here, so if we start off going somewhere and talking about something we consider important, changes will come. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. I think this is the reason why University of Rijeka works well with EU funding, with this positive energy and someone who is real, have focus and has attitude. Yeah, it is a team, but the team needs a leader and a head of the team. Let's say it in that way. I'm happy to present now our dear friend and one who is actually actively involved in our fundraising, if I may say that, the fundraising of the Center for Advanced Studies. Aleš Lipnik is the head, again, of the Center for Cooperation with Economy at the University of Primorska, Science and Research Center, Koper, Slovenia. His main field of work and research is oriented at innovation policy studies and services for supporting entrepreneurship and cooperation between industry and academia. He is member of different regional, national and EU-based working evaluation and expert groups from the field of innovation and economy. He has long-term experiences in a number of different EU-funded projects from the field of innovation. And he teaches courses connected with his field of expertise, project management, technology and knowledge transfer, innovation and innovation policies, and production and innovation management. And he has marvelous ecological olive trees and produces excellent olive oil. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And as already our colleague said, it's hard to tell something new when you are the last speaker in the day. So, not to repeat my former speaker. So I decided to tell maybe a short story about my experience. I'm working at the Science and Research Center for 15 years, and as you know, probably Science and Research Center is the member of the University of Primorska, who was established 11 years ago. When I started actually 15 years ago, we started with the idea to concentrate knowledge in the region, to concentrate sources in order to foster development of the region. And somehow, my job there started with one cross-border project in FARE program, which was at that time only program. We can apply for it. After 3 years, actually, we from this pre-accession instruments, which was FARE, we counted was about 47 different EU funded programs which could apply, and then we stopped to number it because there's no sense to do this. There's no sense to do this because we have to change our thinking and to change our approach in order to be successful in this field, we say. Well, first of all, I have to say what's the motivation for participating in EU-funded programs. And it was said many times before, I will repeat it, it's not the money on the first place. Despite the researchers looking for money for the research, deans looking at the money for the new buildings, chairs, leader of the chairs asked for the money for their study programs. But despite all of this, actually motivation helped to define someone else. So, for example, recognize the challenges and how to address these challenges with cooperation with the best player in the field, probably. To know the way of thinking, to share the ideas, to share the knowledge with the players outside of our narrow country, for example. And of course, you can get money for that, and that's a good solution if you want to reach all these goals. But when you are looking for the final, as the title of the panel is founding for financing, it's actually a more important approach you have to when you decide to looking for the source from the EU funds. I divide this in two approaches. It's a proactive or passive approach. As it was said before, it's happened to all of us that we saw the call, see a huge amount of money which is available for this and that, and the people said, wow, what can we do for this money? Probably we can apply it. We can adopt a little our ideas we have and we will get a lot of money. Wrong approach. Wrong approach. Last experience, we said it's as an instrument in Horizon 2020. This was just published, the results of the first poll. 72 proposals from Slovenia results in 2 successful proposals. That means 2.88% successful rate, which is not very encouraging for them. But the information they get, it was there is a huge amount of money available for you. It's easy money, just apply for that and you will be on the right side. Wrong. Wrong. And what I am talking about is this proactive approach, which is actually started 14 years ago again, when I was one member of one national expert group in Brussels, and met one colleague working for the DG. They were responsible for the FP5 or 6 at that time. And then I got an idea to propose probably some ideas which could be included in next call probably for the FP6. And I was a little afraid because of that, because I think that I'm proposing something illegal probably. And he looked at me and he said, well, look, Alex, what do you think? We didn't set any of the priorities, any of 50 priorities. They were all 50 priorities from the last call was suggested by the people like you who came to Brussels, explain us why are these important, and then we decided to include it. So that's how the things are going. Okay, we noticed that, and then we find out that the matter of communication is actually very important. But not at the time when the call is published, but much before, when the programming is happened, when the priorities are set on the regional, national, or EU level. It's not the simple way that we want to push our priorities to be part of the EU or national priorities. It's the way to communicate with the people who are doing programming, to exchange our knowledge, our problems, in order to find the best solution for reaching these strategic goals set by the national or EU level. So, it is not the way that EU will solve our problems, it's the way how we can, with our knowledge, solve the regional, national, or EU problems. So we we started to be part of these different groups, programming, advisory groups, etc., in order to, again, communicate about the topics, about the possible topics, about the possible priorities, and in order to be near the source of information, to be a successful way. And so we are actively involved in preparation of regional development programs, national priorities, etc. And what the last positive things, what happened in Slovenia is that we established so-called wide programming council for Horizon 2020, which is consists from all NCPs, national contact persons, and also people from the universities and public research center, in order to be actively involved in preparation of working programs for the future. As you probably know that the first working programs are already near the finish, and now we are already preparing the working programs for 2016 and 17. So that means that we have to look forward to find out all challenges, to recognize the opportunities, and to work with hand in hand with the people with the same topics as we are. Well, it's not the goal you reach once and you're set, as you know. The political situation change, the political orientation change, so it's a permanent process of communication with the different level in order to be successful in that. Well, but through the years, you can establish some kind of personal network who help you to that you can be, let me say, successful in that process. It was already mentioned that new programs are oriented toward concentration of sources, concentration of knowledge. And it's happened also that in many programs or calls, when we can participate, it's not more enough that we want to do something which will be somehow useful for Europe or national level as well, but that you have to prove your past expertise, of course, and investment in that field in order to make this last step to be part of the wider community, to be recognized as a player in EU level. So, this is the, let me say, my impression about my work. And as I said at the beginning, it was very good experience, hard one, as I said, 72 project proposals with 2 successful. So they asked us how many proposals you write in the FP7 and in Horizon 20, and the answer, actually we wrote 2 proposals and we succeeded both. Thank you.
This is a good and excellent ending, actually. Efficiency 100%. That's the point. For the moment, yes. Thank you for being patient and staying until the end of this session. I'm happy because we are working with someone who is efficient. Natasha, you met Aleš. And I would like to call Vedran maybe to just briefly summarize what was it that happened today and what. Okay, without micro.
So it's hard to say anything at the end of such a big, long, and I would say productive day. I don't have any PowerPoints. I'm not going to make the summary because, as Snezhina has outlined at the beginning, our goal is actually to be non-classical and flexible when approaching the issue of interdisciplinary studies for Europe. So we actually decided, having in mind that there's this famous song of Cat Stevens, we've come a long way, and then we are changing all the day. I mean, we have changed a lot due to the inputs from the first panel, which was focusing on general issues, and just a remark, have organized a distribution of the paper written by Joseph Weiler to all of you so that we have food for thought tomorrow. And we went then to discussing European interdisciplinary studies. We ended up discussing the European funds and the dilemma between content and the shape that is already here and how to fit into it, but we will pick it up tomorrow. So in any sense, in any case, we decided actually to, because the public tomorrow is going to be much bigger. I mean, several people traveling to Rijeka, several of them going to join us tomorrow. Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs and European Affairs, Vesna Pusu is going to be with us tomorrow. Mayor, some other guys. So we will actually propose to stop right now so that you have an opportunity to have a coffee. There will be a bus picking you up at 5:30 and bringing you back to the hotel to have at least a little bit of rest. Then we will pick you up again at 7:45 and present some delicious food that Snežana already has been presented in the PowerPoint. I'm not quite sure what you will get, but you will definitely get something pretty delicious because the restaurant is very good. And the dinner will be hosted by the mayor of Rijeka, Vojko Oversnel. And as you probably know, Rijeka is competing for becoming the European capital of culture in 2020. So I mean, SAS is supporting the endeavor. And we will then, at the beginning of tomorrow's first session, make a summary of today, carry the questions that we have been discussing here today in a condensed form to the forum tomorrow, so that we have a kind of an informed and intensive debate tomorrow. We will then have a summary tomorrow by the end of the day at 6. So in any case, hvala na pažnji. Vaše pitanja, that was my intention to have it here in Croatian. That was your end. I'm ending here. Thank you so much for being us and having the patience to stay until the very end. It was intensive. Let's right now have an intensive break, an intensive dinner, and thank you once again. We see each other at 7:45. Thank you.